They called me insane when I announced that I'd sold our ancestral home to a logistics company just so I could have it shipped, brick by brick, to Japan. The same house my great-grandfather built with his bare hands in 1893, the same one where generations of my family had been born and buried. My mother screamed until her voice gave out. My sister refused to speak to me. And the neighbors? They watched like vultures as cranes tore apart our heritage, piece by piece, to be sent across the ocean as a museum exhibit. But none of them knew the truth. None of them knew what I had found inside those walls, what I was trying to keep buried beneath centuries of nostalgia. The story really began 5 months earlier, on a Sunday that smelled of old varnish and wet dust. I'd returned to the house after nearly a decade abroad, following my father's death. The house sat on a hill outside Nagano, overlooking terraced rice fields and misdrapped cedar forests. From the outside, it looked eternal, like time itself had chosen to rest here. But when I opened the door, it breathed at me. Wood groaned, the floor sighed, and somewhere deep inside, a hinge whispered my name. I tried to laugh it off. Houses make sounds, especially old ones, but this was different. It felt *aware. The first person I saw was Aunt Seo, her back turned to me, in the kitchen. You came back, she said without looking. The house must have called you. It called me. I asked, dropping my suitcase beside the doorway. She finally turned, her eyes cloudy and red-rimmed. It always calls us back. No one leaves forever. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house creaked, yes, but the rhythm was wrong, to deliberate, to slow. Like footsteps pacing beneath the floorboards. Around 2 a.m., I went downstairs with my phone, flashlight. The air smelled faintly of burnt oil and something metallic. In the living room, I noticed the family altar was open, its sliding doors pushed wide. Tug premier anti-touch since hands arrive ash. I whispered, half joking, half afraid. The sound that answered wasn't a voice, but a hum, low and distant, vibrating through the walls. I reached out and placed my hand on the beam above the altar. It was warm. The next morning, I confronted Aunt Seo about it. You opened the altar last night? I asked. She didn't flinch. No, but if it opened for you, that means the house recognizes you now. It's awake. I stared at her, unsure if she was joking. Awake, it's a building. Aunt Seo. She smiled thinly, her hands trembling as she poured tea. You think it's just wooden nails. This house is older than you understand. It's alive in the way forests are alive. And like any living thing, it remembers. It punishes. I laughed, but the sound came out too high-pitched. Punishes for what? For forgetting, she said simply. For trying to leave. Later that day, I went exploring, determined to prove her wrong. The attic was cramped, filled with relic trunks of silk kimonos, boxes of porcelain bowls, yellowed family photographs. Near the back, bitter planks, I found something that didn't belong. A heavy wooden chest sealed with iron bands and a tag bearing our family crest. The crest had been scratched through, violently, as if by a knife. I should have stopped there. But curiosity is a cruel inheritance. I pried it open with a crowbar I found in the shed. Inside was a pile of bundled letters, a cracked rosary, and an old photograph sepia-toned, showing a man I didn't recognize standing before the house, holding a shovel. Behind him, faintly visible, was a figure at the window. Its face was blurred, but the outline of its hand pressed against the glass looked disturbingly human. That night, I couldn't stop staring at the photograph. Every time I blinked, I imagined that figure shifting closer to the frame. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. ***, you shouldn't have opened it. Première phrase. My first instinct was to suspect my sister, Aiko, who had always had a flair for melodrama. I texted her immediately. **me. Did you send that? Aiko. Send what? **me. Never mind. I didn't sleep. The next morning, Aunt Seo was gone. Her room was untouched, futon neatly folded, teacup washed, shoes still in the entryway. But her phone lay on the counter, buzzing endlessly with unread messages from her son in Tokyo. That's when I started to believe her. I called the local police, who shrugged it off as an elderly woman wandering off. But something in their eyes told me they'd seen this before. 2 days later, I found her scarf hanging from the rafters in the attic, tied into a perfect noose. The day after that, the house began bleeding. It started with small things of brownish red, ooze seeping between the floorboards, staining my socks as I walked. Then the walls began to drip, faint streaks like diluted ink. I touched one out of morbid curiosity. It smelled like rust and rain. That night, I packed my bags. I told myself I would burn the house down if I had to. But when I tried to leave, the front door refused to open. The latch turned freely, but the wood wouldn't budge. The windows, too, felt as if they'd been fused shut. I screamed into the empty halls. "What do you want from me?" The answer came as a whisper from every wall, every beam, every breath of air. Remember, when I woke the next morning, still, the walls dry, the doors unlocked. I left without looking back. For weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd failed something that the house had wanted me to uncover, something deeper. So I hired a team architectural, historians, preservationists, even a logistics company to dismantle the place and ship it overseas. If I couldn't destroy it, I would at least take control of its fate. Everyone thought I did it for vanity, for profit, for prestige. They didn't understand that I was trying to contain it. Now, as I stand in the Tokyo Museum, staring at the reconstructed facade behind its glass enclosure, I can feel it watching me still. The air is cold, but the walls, they seem to breathe. And somewhere in the hum of the lights above, I swear I can hear Aunt Seo's voice. Faint, but unmistakable. You only moved the curse. Yuto, you didn't end it. The first incident happened 3 nights after the exhibit opened. The museum guards called me in the middle of the night, their voices trembling like children caught in a storm. "Sir," one said, "the house. It's making sounds." I almost hung up. Of course, old wood contracts and settles. It creaks. But something in his voice, an undercurrent of raw panic, made me dress and take the first train to Shibuya. The National Museum of Cultural Memory loomed over the city like a block of silence. Its polished marble floors echoed every footstep as I hurried toward the Yamashiro House exhibit tower, Ancestral home. Fully reconstructed under the sterile glow of track lighting. From the outside, it was perfect. To Tommy, Shosi. Verandal transported across the sea, reassembled plank by plank, but even from the hallway, I could feel it. That same oppressive warmth in the air, like standing too close to a breathing animal. "Where are the guards?" I asked the curator on duty, a pale man named Ishida, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. "They quit," he said simply. "I love them. Wouldn't even come back for their pay." I frowned. "Because of noises." He swallowed hard. "Not just noises." He led me to the security office and played the footage. The time stamp, read 2:03 a.m. The camera was trained on the exhibit's entryway. Everything was still at first. Then, faintly, the Fusama sliding doors at the front began to shiver. One door slid open halfway slowly, as though guided by an unseen hand, and a shadow crossed the threshold, human-shaped, but wrong. The silhouette was too long, the movements too fluid, gliding rather than walking. "Do you see that?" Ishida whispered. "Yes." My throat felt dry. Who was in the building at that hour? No one. Every access point was sealed. No alarms triggered. The recording ended abruptly in static. I tried to rationalize it. Technical glitch. Draft. Light distortion. But then I noticed the last frame of the footage frozen amid the static. It showed the exhibit's interior. The family altar's doors, which had been closed for public display, were now wide open. I told Ishida to shut the exhibit down until further notice. He looked relieved, as if I'd just lifted a weight from his chest. But that relief didn't last. "When premier. Retourne date found Miterstep. No, return address." Inside, a single photograph of me, standing in front of the exhibit that morning, staring into the camera. Only, I hadn't been there. I spent that night drinking. Sake, beer, anything to smother the feeling that something had followed me back from the museum. Around midnight, my apartment lights flickered. My phone buzzed an unknown number again. This time, a voice message. I pressed play. A phantom. The same sound that had once filled the Ancestral home's walls. And beneath it, a whisper so low it grazed the edge of comprehension. "You moved the curse." "Yuto, but you never left the house." I dropped the phone. The screen went black. I told myself it was exhaustion, stress, unresolved grief. I even considered therapy. But when I looked out the window, I saw condensation forming on the glass from the inside, like something breathing close to it. A faint handprint appeared, and in the fog, 4 words traced themselves as if drawn by a fingertip. Remember the buried room. The next morning, I went to the museum again. This time alone. The staff had already locked down the exhibit, but I had clearance. Inside, the air was heavy with that same metallic, centrust, rain, and something older. The lights hummed weakly overhead, flickering every few seconds. I stood in the middle of the reconstructed tatami room, staring at the walls. Buried room, I murmured. In the original house, there had been rumors. Stories my father told me when I was small about a hidden chamber beneath the altar, sealed before the war. He said our ancestors had built it to protect something sacred, though he never said what. When I asked him once, he went quiet for so long that I thought he hadn't heard me. Then he's some Mary be unearthed? No, première knew it literally. I moved the barrier, rope aside, stepped over it, and slid open the altar doors. The floor beneath was made of wood panels, perfectly replicated from the original. But 1 plank near. The center looked newer, lighter, as if replaced. My hands trembled as I pressed down. It gave way with a hollow thunk. I pried it open, a narrow void yawned beneath. Dust and stale air poured out, thick enough to sting my throat. Inside, wrapped in decaying cloth, was a small lacquered box. My heartbeat drowned out the hum of the lights as I lifted it out. Flinched so violently, the clipboard in his hands clattered to the floor. Yamashiro-san, he whispered. We heard something inside last night. Voices, not through the speakers, the air ducts. They were speaking old Japanese. Not any dialect we could recognize. Did you go in? He looked at me, eyes hollow. Itride. But when I stepped through the entrance, the room felt wrong. I couldn't breathe. The air, it pressed against me like water. And then I saw her. My mouth went dry. Who? He pointed toward the new door. A woman in a white kimono, standing right there. But she wasn't standing. What do you mean? She was hanging, Yamashiro-san. Hanging from the ceiling by her scarf. The world tilted. And Seo's scarf. Before I could respond, the lights above us flickered and went dark. The emergency lamps kicked in, bathing everything in a sick red glow. The house seemed to inhale. I heard the sound of wood groaning, slow and deliberate, like it was stretching awake. Get out, I told Kawahara. He didn't move. He just stared through the glass, murmuring something under his breath. His eyes were fixed on the altar. I turned to look and felt the blood drain from my face. The altar doors were open again, and the tooth I'd found, the one I'd been keeping locked in my apartment, was sitting neatly in the center. I bolted. Outside, I called the curator, demanded that the exhibit be sealed permanently. But Ishida's voice on the other end was faint, broken by static. We can't shut it down. People! Already inside. Inside? What people? The tourists, he said weakly. They wanted to see the new door. I raced back into the museum. The hallway to the exhibit was filled with muffled screams. When I turned the corner, my heart seized. The tourists were gone. Their belongings lay scattered: phones, purses, a camera still recording. The footage on the tiny screen showed them laughing as they stepped through the new doorway. Then the video warped. The last frame was nothing but darkness, punctuated by a faint whisper. Welcome home. By nightfall, the police had arrived. They treated it like a structural collapse, a tragic accident. But when the investigators tried to enter the exhibit, they couldn't. Every piece of equipment malfunctioned inside that room. Lights shorted out. Cameras froze. Even their radio signals cut to static. They sealed the area with caution tape, but I knew it was useless. You can't quarantine something that doesn't belong to this world. Memory. Suddenly, I wasn't in the museum anymore. I was in Nagano, standing in front of the original Yamashiro house, its roof glistening with morning dew. My father stood beside me, younger, alive. He smiled down at me, his hand resting on my shoulder. Someday, he said, this house will be yours. But remember, if you stop tending to its heart, it will start tending to you. I blinked. The scene warped. The house decayed before my eyes, roof collapsing, walls rotting, beams blackening, the land beneath it split, swallowing the foundation. And from within, that same voice whispered, "You cannot destroy memory. You could enormous you when Première Camto I was a museum." Fire trucks screamed around me, red, light slicing through the night. The Yamashiro exhibit was gone, reduced to ash. I sat up, coughing, my lungs raw from the smoke. A medic rushed to my side, but I brushed him off. The air was heavy with the scent of burned cedar and incense. Amid the rubble, something glinted. I staggered forward, ignoring the shouts behind me, and crouched beside it. The blackened tooth, perfectly intact. I reached for it and stopped. For a heartbeat, I saw my reflection in the shard of museum glass beside it. My face was pale, my eyes darker than they should have been. My skin was lined with faint, splinter-like cracks. I pulled back my sleeve. Beneath the skin of my wrist, faint grain patterns pulsed like wood, remembering it had once been alive. The tooth vibrated. The ground beneath the ruin shifted, ever so slightly. And in the faint whisper of the wind, I heard it again. "You burned the house, Yuto. But you kept the seed." That night, I checked into another hotel, far from the city. I placed the tooth on the table and stared at it until dawn. It didn't move, didn't hum, didn't glow, but it watched. Morning, I tried to throw it into the river. It sank instantly, vanishing beneath the current. I told myself it was over. 2 days later, fishermen found something floating downstream. A small, lacquered box, washed clean of ash. Inside, a tooth blackened, ancient, still warm. The museum refused to take it. So the city sent it to the Nagano Prefectural Archive for study. They put it in a sealed glass case, labeled it as artifact of unknown origin, and a week later, a new door appeared in the archive storage room. Just one, cedarwood, faintly fragrant. The same pattern carved across its frame, the Yamashiro crest no longer, inverted. I didn't go to see it. I didn't need to. Because that night, when I looked at the wall of my apartment, I saw the same door. Forming there too, the scent of cedar filled the air. A voice whispered, soft and sorrowful, through the grain of the wood. "Welcome home, Yuto." I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there on the floor, watching the shape of the door solidify out of the plaster. It grew the way a scab grows, slow, inevitable, alive. The pale wall around it darkened, lines forming grain, and with every breath I took, the scent of cedar deepened. My apartment, once sterile, modern now, smelled like rain on old wood, incense, and faint rot. I wanted to scream. Instead, I whispered Nohal didn't leave my mouth. It echoed back at me from behind the door. Then someone knocked. Once, twice, 3 times. The same rhythm my father used when coming home from work. "Low. Away," I said, my voice breaking. A pause. Then, from the other side, a voice. "Soft and warm, exactly, it's cold here." "Let me in." I stood, trembling. Every instinct screamed that if I touched that door, if I even looked along, I would never leave again. But curiosity, the same sickness that had driven me all along, tugged at my heart. I stepped closer. Tikaned. My reflection shimmered faintly on the door's polished grain. Only, it wasn't quite my reflection. The face in the wood smiled when I didn't let me in. It said again. "Première baquet d'ouette, coffee table." The sound broke. Something in the silence, the door shuddered, as though offended. A thin crack split the center, and warm air began to seep through, smelling faintly of blood and incense. I watched in horror as the handle formed smooth, black iron, shaped like an open mouth. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Juste en ligne if you wake up." I froze. Another message came a second later. "If you don't, it'll open for you." I didn't think. I grabbed duct tape, rope, whatever I had, and started sealing the door shut. But the moment the tape touched the wood, it began to peel itself away. The house no, the memory rejected, my denial. And then the knocking returned, louder this time. Each thud echoed through my skull. I stumbled back into the corner, clutching my head. The walls began to flex, swelling and contracting with my breath. My apartment wasn't an apartment anymore. It was becoming my vision blurred. The floor warped into tatami. The city hum outside my window faded into cicadas. The white light of the ceiling shifted into the golden glow of lanterns. I was back in Nagano. The Yamashiro house stood around me, whole again, clean and perfect. Not the charred ruin, not the museum, replica asterisk, the real thing. Asterisk, I could smell my mother's miso simmering somewhere. I could hear my father humming. For a moment, I felt peace. Then I saw her. Aunt Seo, kneeling by the altar, her white scarf wrapped neatly around her neck. She turned to me, her eyes bright and wet. You came home, she said. This isn't real, I whispered. It's as real as it needs to be, she said, smiling. The house remembers. That's all that matters. I looked around. Every beam gleamed. Every tatami, straw was new. The garden outside was green and alive. But when I stepped closer to the window, I saw that beyond the garden there was nothing, just an endless black void swallowing the world. You can't live anymore, she said softly. You moved the house across the sea, and it followed you. It's not bound to land, Yuto. It's bound to you. No, I said, shaking my head. I burned it. I destroyed it. Her smile wavered. You burned its shell. Not its heart. You carry that inside you now. I pressed my hand against my chest and felt it, a pulse that wasn't mine. Slow, deep, wooden. What do I do? I asked, barely breathing. She reached out, her hand cold as old cedar. You remember. That's the only no première bakedawe? I won't live like this. The house groaned around us. The altar doors slammed, shut. A wind rose from nowhere, scattering incense ash through the air. I felt the walls closing in, the roof bowing downward, like a mouth sealing shut. Then I heard asterisk, my voice asterisk behind me. You can't run from what you are. I turned. My reflection stood there identical in every way except the eyes. They were black, hollow, like knots in timber. I'm not you, I said. You are the house now, it whispered. You carried its seed across the ocean. You fed it with your fear. You made it remember. I'll destroy it again. You can't destroy yourself. The reflection smiled and stepped forward. When it touched me, the world shattered. I was on the floor of my apartment again. Smoke filled the air. Beyond was bleeding splinters driven deep into the flesh. The cedar door stood open now, yawning into blackness. From inside came the faint sound of dripping water. Then a voice I hadn't heard since childhood. Yuto, dinner's ready. My mother! I wanted to run. Instead, I stepped forward. The air beyond the door felt heavy, wet. The darkness wasn't empty. It was thick, swirling with motes of light like dust in a sunbeam. And at the far end, faintly glowing, I saw the house again, the real one, waiting for me. I turned to leave, but my apartment was gone. Behind me was only another door, identical, endless. Everywhere I turned, door after door after door. Each one whispered in the same voice. Asterisk, asterisk, welcome home. Asterisk, asterisk, my phone buzzed one last time in my pocket. A single notification. Asterisk, new voicemail. From father, asterisk, I press play. Yuto, his voice said calmly, as if he were leaving a note on the fridge. The house remembers everyone who loves it, everyone who hates it. There's no escaping that. But maybe, just maybe, if you can forgive it, Tiff, you can forgive asterisk as asterisk it might finally sleep. The recording clicked. Off. I looked down at the tooth in my hand. It was no longer black. It was turning white again, almost human. I could feel it pulsing with my heartbeat. The air trembled. The doors waited, and then I heard her Aunt Seo's voice, soft, almost kind. Asterisk, asterisk, it's time to choose. Yuto, remember. Or forget. Asterisk, asterisk, I closed my eyes and took one step forward. The moment I crossed the threshold, I expected to fall into darkness, some bottomless void, a final descent into whatever hell memory had built for me. But instead, there was asterisk light, asterisk soft, amber light, the kind that filters through SG screens at dusk. The air was warm, heavy with the smell of tatami and hinoki. I knew this realm. It was my childhood bedroom. The faded cart flag above the window, the wooden soldiers lined on the shelf. The faint scratch on the wall, where I'd once carved my name. For a heartbeat, I believed I'd finally gone mad. That everything, the museum, the fire, the curse was a fever dream born of guilt. Then I heard someone humming in the next room. It was my mother. I opened the sliding door. She was there, kneeling by the hearth, stirring miso soup in a cast iron pot. Her movements were the same, slow, deliberate, tender. Steam curled around her face, softening every line. "Mom," I said. She turned to me and smiled. "You're home." I stepped closer. You're dead." Her smile didn't falter. "Everything that's loved here lives forever." My legs trembled. "Where's Dad?" She nodded toward the garden. "He's waiting." Through the open shtji, I saw him kneeling beside the koi pond, feeding the fish as he used to. The sight shattered me. I ran out, the air sharp with summer rain and cedar. My father let you fast calm, familiar, as it is grunge. So you did well. "You brought the house home again." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I tried to destroy it." He smiled faintly. "You can't destroy what you are." I dropped to my knees. "What am I?" He stood, his shadow stretching across the stones. "A vessel. Every generation must carry the memory forward. You brought it across the sea, gave it new soil. Now it grows. I don't want it." I screamed. I never wanted any of this. His expression softened with something almost like pity. "You misunderstand. The house never asks what we want. It only asks that we remember the ground rippled beneath me." The koi pond darkened, the water turning black and still. The air thickened again, that metallic scent returning the smell of rust, rain, and blood. My father's outline began to blur, his skin splitting into patterns of wood grain. "Stop!" I shouted. "I won't let this happen." He tilted his head, eyes now hollow knots. "Ten forge." But understand what forgetting means. The garden vanished. I was standing in a vast, empty void, the house suspended around me, its beams floating in space, the walls crumbling into memory. The doors of every room hung open, leading into other versions of my life. Me as a child, me in Tokyo, me standing before the burning museum. The house wasn't a place anymore, it was time itself, folding in on me. And through it all, I could hear hundreds of voices, my ancestors, whispering, praying, begging to be remembered. "Yuto," one voice, said a woman's voice, faint and tired. "And Seo, you can still end it." "How?" I shouted. "By forgiving. I don't understand. You don't have to. Just let go." The structure groaned, beams twisting like ribs in pain. 1,000 memories flared at once, my childhood laughter, my mother's hands, my father's silence, the fire, the curse, the truth. They swirled around me, screaming for attention, for permanence. I clutched my head and fell to my knees. "I can't carry all of this anymore." "That's the point," her voice said. "No one can. Let it rest." The tooth burned hot in my hand. Premier Luke had done it, was glowing. Fate wasn't wine anymore. I understood then. The house lived because I refused to forgive. It's because I kept feeding it my fear, my need to control it. It was memory, without mercy. But if I could forgive, if I could stop resisting, maybe it would finally sleep. I pressed the tooth to my chest. "I forgive you," I whispered. "All of you." The house, the blood, the past, the light burst outward, blinding, searing, clean. When eyes, premier walinginan. A hospital bed. A nurse hovered nearby, startled to see me awake. "You're lucky," she said softly. "They found you in the ruins of that old museum. You'd been missing for 3 days." I blinked. "The house?" She frowned. "What house?" Outside the window, the city stretched under a pale dawn. No scent of cedar, no hum in the walls, just silence. I smiled weakly. "Forze first." Stimming Montes felt real. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, "Oh, someone dropped this off for you. Said it belonged to your family." She handed me a small box, lacquered wood, smooth, familiar. My heart stuttered. I lifted the lid. Inside lay a single seed white, perfect, carved from bone. I stared at it for a long time before whispering, "You can sleep now." The seed pulsed once, faintly, like a sigh, and somewhere far away in Nagano, maybe, or in a place beyond, remembering a house, finally exhaled. For a long while, I stayed in that hospital bed with the box on the table, beside me, refusing to touch it again. Nurses came and went. Doctors tested my vitals, muttering about dehydration and smoke inhalation. Première les thèmes. They were part of a world I was slowly remembering how to live in, the one with traffic outside, vending machines humming, sunlight that didn't smell like cedar. But every night, when the ward lights dimmed, I could hear it. Not knocking, not voices, just a faint rhythm, like wood expanding and contracting in the walls. A heartbeat I'd almost grown used to. On the 7th night, the nurse who'd first found Miyaka. Her badge read brought me tea. "You look better," she said. "Stronger." I nodded. "I feel lighter, like something's been lifted." She smiled, a little uncertainly. "Good. Maybe you'll sleep through the night." Then she left. The tea steamed gently on the tray. The room smelled of disinfectant and oolong. I almost believed her believed that the world was ordinary again. Then I noticed the steam curling. Differently, it didn't drift toward the ceiling. It coiled, deliberately, forming thin spirals that twisted toward the box. "No," I whispered. "Not again." The steam thickened, condensing into faint lines of smoke that traced across the box's surface. The carved wood pulsed once, twice. Then a whisper rose from inside, barely audible, like breath caught in a wooden flute. "Aiuto." My name, spoken with tenderness. My mother's voice! I reached for the box, hands trembling. "You're supposed to be gone." A pause. Then, "We never leave the ones who remember." My eyes filled before I could stop them. "I forgave you." I forgave all of it. "Yes," she said softly. "That's why it can rest." But memory doesn't vanish. When it rests, it becomes seed. I stared at the pale object inside. It seemed to glow from within now, faintly warm. "What happens if it grows?" Her voice faded into something like wind through leaves. "Then it remembers anew. But differently this time. You can choose what it becomes." The hospital room shimmered. For a heartbeat, I was standing again, in the museum ruins, ash swirling around. Emmy. The air pulsed with whispers of all those who'd lived inside the house, their stories, their grief, their laughter. They weren't asking to be erased. They were asking to be retold. When I blinked, the room steadied. The box sat quiet. The seed no longer glowed. By morning, I checked myself out. The discharge papers felt meaningless in my hands. I took the train north away. From Tokyo, toward Nagano, toward where it all began. The hill where the Yamashiro house had stood was empty now, reclaimed by grass and wind. Only the stone foundation remained, half swallowed by earth. I stood there a long time, the box heavy, in my coat pocket. I thought about fire and loss and inheritance. About what it meant to carry a memory without letting it devour you. I knelt, opened the box, and held the seed in my palm. It was cool now, smooth as polished ivory. "You're not a curse," I said quietly. "You're a story that got stuck." The wind stirred, soft and low, almost like a sigh. I dug a shallow hollow at the edge of the foundation and placed the seed inside. As I covered it with soil, I whispered, "Sleep, and if you wake again, wake kindly." The sky was the color of ash and silver. When I stood up, I thought that was the end. But seasons have their own memories. By the next spring, villagers began whispering about a tree on the Yamashiro, hill-tall and straight. Its bark smooth and pale, its scent faintly of incense and rain. They said that when the wind blew just right, you could hear something in its branches, not wailing, not haunting, singing. Sometimes, when I visit, I stand beneath that tree and listen. I hear fragments of old laughter, the murmur of voices. Première usette Tokno. Not trapped, not cursed, just remembered, held lightly in wood and air. And every year, the tree drops a single seed. I take it in my hand, white and warm, and I whisper to it before I leave, "Sleep well. Remember gently." Then I walk down the hill, and the wind follows me like breath no longer heavy, no longer pleading, only alive. By the things, the villager had started, leaving offerings at the base of the tree, small cups of sake, folded paper cranes, coins glinting in the moss. They didn't know the story, not the real one, but they sensed what lingered there. Reverence, maybe. Or the echo of something that had once been grief and was now something quieter. I went less often that year. The nightmares had stopped, and the rhythm in my chest that once felt like a second would gone still. I started teaching again at the university in Tokyo architecture, of all things. I told my students that every structure holds memory, that design is not about walls, but about asterisk the way air moves through them. Asterisk, they nodded. Took notes, never realizing how literal I meant it. But sometimes, when the classroom was empty and the projector hummed, I would smell cedar. Then I'd glance at my hand, half expecting to see the faint grain beneath my skin again. It never appeared. Still, I couldn't shake the sense that somewhere inside me, something was waiting listening. One night in late autumn, I received a letter. No return address, only an unfamiliar, looping script on the envelope. Ainsi doit. Photograph, the Yamashiro Hill, the tree. And beneath it, half buried in the soil, a wooden door. Message scrawled on the back with Sinodi didn't go at fear. I told myself it wasn't my problem any more that the house had been laid to rest. That whatever this was, it belonged to the land now. But the thought gnawed at me. Slow and steady, like roots pushing through old foundations. 2 weeks later, I was standing before the hill again. The air smelled of rain and wood smoke. The villagers had cleared a path to the tree, marking it with paper, charms. And there, just as the photograph had shown, was a door small, no taller than my knee, built into the ground near the tree's roots. Its surface was new, unweathered, but the carving was unmistakable. Our family crest. I knelt, my fingers hovering above the handle. The door was warm, almost pulsing. I half expected to hear whispers from the other side, but there was only silence deep, waiting silence. I told you to rest, I murmured. Ewind. Moved through the branches above, a sigh that might have been laughter, or warning. I opened the door. Beneath was not earth, but a hollow filled with light golden, soft, alive. It didn't burn or blind, it welcomed. I felt it reach for me, not with malice, but with recognition. Memory doesn't die, I thought. It transforme. And I understood then, the house wasn't returning to curse the world again. It was changing shape, becoming something gentler. A voice drifted up from the hollow childlike, curious. Yuto, I froze. Who's there? Do you remember me? I leaned closer. The light shimmered, and for a moment, I saw faces forming within it, my mother, my father, and Seo, even the strangers who had vanished in the museum. Not twisted, not ghostly, smiling. You carried us far, the childlike voice said. Now we remember in peace. My throat closed. Are you free? Memory is never free, it said, softly, but it can be kind. The light dimmed, pulsing once like a heartbeat before fading into the soil. The hollow filled itself back in, the small door dissolving as if it had never existed. Team Premier Stud had scad cleared. The scent of cedar had softened into something like rain and warm earth. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, not the sharp release of exorcism, but the quiet relief of forgiveness accepted. When I turned to leave, I saw a child at the edge of the path, a village boy, no more than 6, holding a small branch from the sacred tree. He smiled shyly. May. Grandmother says the tree used to be a house, he said. Première smiled back, she's not rind of house. One that remembered too much, I said. But now it remembers. Gently, he nodded, clutching the branch. It told me stories last night. What kind of stories? I asked. About a man who went far away, he said, and came back to plant a dream. I didn't answer. I just watched as he ran down the hill, laughter trailing behind him. The wind stirred again, brushing through the leaves of the tree, and I thought I heard it whisper soft, like the breath of a sleeping world. Thank you, Yuto. That night, back in Tokyo, I dreamed of the house one last time. Not burning, not haunting, just standing beneath the same pale tree, its walls open to the sky, filled with light. Inside, every voice that had ever lived there hummed together, a harmony of remembrance. When I woke, the world was quiet, truly quiet, no cedar. Nom. Just morning light. I rose, opened the window, and breathed. For the first time, the air felt empty. Not lost, free. Years passed. Seasons came and went like breaths through paper walls. The tree on the Yamashiro hill grew taller, its branches reaching, so high they brushed the mist. Each spring, it dropped one white seed, and each year, someone from the village planted. It's somewhere new by the river, near shrines, along narrow roads where travelers might rest in its shade. No one spoke of the house anymore. The legend had softened, blurred, become a lullaby whispered to children on rainy nights. If you listen closely, the old women said, you can hear the wind telling stories from the cedar. I moved back to Nagano for good. Built a small home at the edge of the valley, facing the hill, simple, open to the air. No altars, no cedar beams, only silence and light. Sometimes I teach architecture still, though what I build now is different structures that breathe, that hold memory without trapping it. I tell my students, houses remember everything. Make sure they remember kindness. One evening, late in summer, I returned to the hill. The tree was heavy. With its new growth, its roots weaving deep into the soil where the house once stood. The villagers had strung wind chimes along its branches, hundreds of them glass, bamboo, tin. When the wind passed through, they sang together in 100 tones, each one soft and fleeting. At the base of the tree, the earth had cracked just slightly, revealing something pale beneath the roots. I brushed away the dirt and found a piece of wood, smooth as polished bone. When I turned it in my hand, I saw faint carvings lines that once formed our family crest, now worn to near nothing. For a moment, I thought I heard my father's voice again. You can't destroy what remembers. Booty seemed like a warning. They sounded like peace. I smiled, set the fragment back in the soil, and whispered, then, let it remember beauty. The sky deepened into twilight. The chimes swayed, and for a heartbeat, I could almost see them, my family, my ancestors, standing beneath the branches. Faces calm, eyes clear, no longer bound to walls or fear or grief. Just part of the wind, the earth, the story. The seed had done its work. As I turned to leave, a small gust brushed past me, gentle as a hand-on. Mishul. It carried the faint scent of cedar, not heavy this time, not haunting, just a memory passing by. I looked back once. The tree shimmered in the fading light, its leaves whispering my name, not as a summons, but as a farewell. And, for the first time in my life, I felt no pull to answer. I walked down the hill, the sound of the chimes following me, until it was lost in the distance. Bizatim. I reached the road. Night had fallen. And all that remained was the quiet hum of living things, the world, still breathing, still remembering, but at last, remembering gently. I never went back after that. I didn't need to. Because I finally understood what the house had tried to teach me all along, that memory is not